Order
An hour.
for January 2025.
Let's all stand for the pledge and a brief moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you.
So our first task will be to approve the agenda. I do want to make a comment. We will be going into executive session after the open session. So how about the executive session that we need to include at the end?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay.
So
The first and the second.
all in favor, say aye. Opposed, the same.
Brett, you're up with the safety minute and cool moment.
So for safety moment for the guest, if we have to get out of here, there's an exit that way. You can go that way, back out the front. I don't think there's going to be a weather event, but if so, just follow us. Next part of my safety moment is we did go through our RESAP program just a month ago. The actual report's out there. So one thing that comes out of actually every year we do a safety improvement plan. It's a requirement of the RESAP program. So one thing we got hit on last year was a lot of people didn't know what they'll go around and essentially ask. Yeah, it's on. It's okay. Yeah. So anyways, every year they ask you to do a safety improvement plan. We got hit last year on basically employees and just leadership in general when asked, didn't know exactly what was in our plan. So every meeting that I have, whether it's a board meeting or an employee meeting, it's something that Henry County does a really good job of. They post it everywhere and they talk about it quite often. So I thought it was appropriate for Safety Minute to go through what our safety improvement plan is for 2025. So one is crew audits. So our goal is to do one crew audit a month with a stretch goal of 2 a month. Daily truck inspection process update. So today we have a process of, making sure that the guys do their walk arounds, their vehicles. And actually our new operation manager said when he was doing it, he found, I don't know if it was a bolt or what it was, but it was a critical piece to the load path for the bucket. And he found that it had been sheared and it was just an accident waiting to happen. And he was able to prevent that. So we're doing this. One thing we hadn't currently done is to actually ride out the buckets. So in other words, send them all the way out and back in every single day as a part of this. So what we're doing is we're incorporating that into our daily inspections. And then we have a whiteboard in the back and essentially it's supposed to be a visual management. So when you walk by, you can see, did the crews do their inspections today or not, right? Because the date would be on there for each of them. So it's a good visual for Johnny and me to be able to go by and just occasionally look at it and say, did they do their audits today or not? So that's that's our second item. Next item is we talked about, we actually had a truck that one of the strobes was bad on, was something that we got hit on the RESAP also. And it really started a discussion in our safety committee around, and this is really a push for me is I've been trying to do everything we can possibly do to bring attention to our vehicles when we're out there. We're on these county roads. They're not very wide. People texting nowadays, it's one of those things that really scares me. And anything we can do to put our guys in a position where folks see them, I think we should do. And so we had made the investment in every one of our field vehicles. So any vehicle that could be in the field, even like our I think it's actually every vehicle but mine, will have strobe lights. And we ended up basically picking out a package of where we wanted them located, what those would look like. All the big trucks, they all come with it standard, right? So this is mainly making sure all those work, number one, and number two, any vehicle that we perceive being out during outages and things like that, then we went ahead and put strobe packages on. So that's actually going to be finished in about the next month, I believe. I thought we were going to do your vehicle first. Yeah, they all wanted me to do mine first. Next one is safety. This is the last one. Community safety education events. We've been doing these quarterly. So we stepped it up this year. We're going to do 2 quarterly. So essentially 8 events. These are our live line demos. So again, we put that on there. So these are the 4 things. If you ever get asked by one of our RESAP auditors, these are the 4 things that we're focusing on for 2025 as a part of our safety improvement. Cool moment. I can't remember what day this was now. Tuesday? It was Friday. Last Friday. So last Friday, we invited community leaders, council, all the government agencies. Actually had a really good turnout. And we invited the press, and then we also invited our partners, SCI. So Tony came and his right-hand man, Adam Peets came. So we introduced our name of our firearm business and announced it to the community. So in prep of that, we were expecting quite a few phone calls. And so we have, which I think is a good telling sign. We've probably had 30 to 40 phone calls since Friday or emails, just asking if they were in the area. So I think that's a good thing to see coming. So anyways, thanks for everybody that came. And I thought that was a really good event. So that's all I got for you.
All right, thank you. So we have with us this evening from Hoosier Energy, Rob Horton and Donna Walker, and they will be presenting about the Hoosier Energy.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having us. We always look forward to this time of year. We've put together a few things that we thought we would share with you. But before we dive into that, there's one thing that I don't want us to lose sight of. And it kind of happens behind the scenes now, but it's the return of patronage capital back to you all. And so after our November board meeting and the board retiring patronage, I think we sent to you all just over $673,000. A good portion of that you had invested with your GNT for 25 years. Some of that you had invested with us since 2018. But we recognize that and we appreciate it as part of our business model. And as long as you have those funds with your GNT, we try to be good stewards of that money. And so that's in large part what tonight's all about, is sitting down with you and sharing what we've been working on just in the past year with you and on your behalf, and to talk about whatever's on your mind. So even though we have some information here that we'll kind of go through, the most important part is to answer whatever questions you have and talk about whatever you'd like to at the end. I will just say that Rob is here to answer all the tough questions, so do not disappoint. Jason's already got his pen out. That's good. The good no. And if we don't have the answers, as always, we'll find out and we'll let you know. So if you want to dive right in, I thought we'd start out and talk a little bit about national industry trends. You know, this is kind of building on what we've been talking about for the past few years when we've come to sit down and talk with you all. And we continue to see reserve margins across the country become tighter and tighter. And that's a factor of existing generating plants continuing to retire at a faster pace than new additions are being added onto the grid. And so that's a trend that is continuing. And as we've talked about that, what that means is that there's less and less extra generation out there in the event that we have an unusual type of circumstance. And so there's less of a buffer against the unexpected into the future. Now what we're also seeing, it's interesting, a few years ago when we would be talking, I would often get the question, what are we doing to make sure we're ready for new load around electric vehicles? How quickly is that going to come? Are we ready for that? And lo and behold, data centers and artificial intelligence have eclipsed that. And so while EV growth is kind of moderated, now we're looking at big mega loads coming onto the system, which are larger than anything that we've experienced in the past. So I say these are national industry trends, but these sound very familiar with what we talk about here locally, because we're seeing the same things, whether it's across our member systems, whether it's the state, the broader Midwest, the nation, everybody's talking about the same issues. How are we going to serve all this additional load growth? So Before we get into what that looks like, I think it's always good to kind of take a look and see, well, where are we starting from before the potential load growth around data centers and AI? And this is something that we've talked about in past years, and it's the North American Electric Reliability Corporation's assessment of how ready the North American bulk power system, which includes Canada and the United States, how prepared are we for the winter season that we find ourselves in right now? They do a similar assessment before the summertime. But when we look at their take on how prepared we are for winter right now, this map would look pretty similar to what we've been looking at the past couple of years. There are areas that have been identified as being very tight if we were to have extreme, prolonged duration weather events that we'd be dealing with. And so that includes MISO, which is the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, where we are currently located. That's part of the regional transmission organization that we're a part of. And so we continue to be part of that higher risk area. A couple of things that are a little bit different than past years. If you look at the area just to the east of us, PJM, and then ahead along the East Coast, you see that this shaded area there is really focusing in on risk around natural gas pipeline capacity. So as the eastern United States has become more and more reliant on natural gas, while the US has ample gas supplies, we don't necessarily have all the gas pipeline infrastructure to get that supply to where it's needed to serve new generators and generators that are picking up more and more load. So that's something that NERC is really watching for. Why do we care about that? Well, MISO oftentimes is importing power from PJM. So when you look at these different areas we've talked about in the past, we're part of this really large interconnected grid. And so we can receive power from PJM. We can also send power to PJM. But I think the story here is that what is happening to areas around you can have impacts on you that are pretty significant. So that's what we continue to watch there. MISO in particular, NERC's view is that MISO is positioned to meet its expected peak demand this winter. But again, we're at a bit of an elevated risk of energy shortfalls during extreme winter conditions. And I might just say, well, are we in one of those extreme winter conditions right now? And yes, it's been very, very cold, but the system's performed very well. And I think in large part, it's because wind has really performed. There are times when wind, which is in the western part of MISO, has represented 20% or a little bit higher of the total energy supply. So wind is performing pretty well right now. But again, reserve margins are tight, so that's why the warning's ahead of seasons. So from that base, let's talk about some of the large load project announcements that we've seen here in the state last year and into this year. It seems like it wasn't very long between each of the announcements of all of these big, large loads that are planned to be located here in Indiana. A couple of things also around this. When you think about announcements don't necessarily translate into real projects. And so that is one of the things that the state is grappling with. And so I'm fortunate enough to serve on an energy issues discussion group that Representative Ed Soliday, who chairs the House Energy Committee, put together. And he wanted us to get together a few times during the summer. He thought 3 times during the summer, just a cross section of cooperative views, IOU views, municipal views, Chamber of Commerce, MISO, Commission, and just talk about some of the issues facing the state around these very large loads, the opportunities and the risks that it poses for the state. So after the 3 planned meetings, I think we're on meeting 7 or 8 now. So he's going to continue to get the group of people together throughout the session. And I think it's been helpful because he's been sharing drafts of potential legislation, and that group is able to sit there very openly and say, that you haven't thought about this, that won't work. And so I think it's a good model. And like I said, I'm very pleased to be part of it, as is Ryan Hadley with IEC. So we're continuing to work very closely with IEC on that for all cooperative views. So the state is trying to figure out how many of these announcements or prospective loads, how many of them may be duplicates. So You know, do you have one very large data center that's looking at multiple locations in the state? How do we count that as a state? You hear announcements, well, how far along are you really? And so we're trying to figure out what that might look like. If you look at the interest across Hoosiers member systems, and if everything were to come to fruition that we've seen interest expressed in, we could see 5,000 megawatts. Our system today is under 1,700 megawatts peak. So we're talking multiples of the size we are today, if that were to be real. Now, all of that is not going to happen. I can say that with confidence, but I think something will happen. I think that there's enough interest. We're seeing this a lot at the national level now. There's a lot of interest in making sure that data centers and artificial intelligence is located here in the United States and doesn't go overseas to areas where we may not have as much control over it. So I think it's become a national security discussion as well. So we'll see, but there's a lot of interest for sure around that. So let's talk about what we've been doing to make sure that we've shored up our generating resources to meet members' needs into the future. And this is an opportunity that I'm super excited about that the Hoosier Energy Board approved in 2024. And that was to jointly acquire the St. Joseph Energy Center along with Wabash Valley. And the St. Joe Energy Center is located in northern Indiana, in New Carlisle, and it's just over 700 megawatts. It's a natural gas combined cycle facility. It came online in 2018, and it's had a phenomenal operating history in its life so far. So its reliability factor has been 99%, which means when it's called on, 99% of the time it's been available to run, which is pretty phenomenal. As far as how much it's run over 90% of the time. We refer to that as capacity factor. And so if you think back to our days of owning Merom Station at Baseload Coal Plant, if Merom had an 85% capacity factor, absolutely, you remember that was a great year. So that just tells you that this facility is operating even more above and beyond that. So we're really excited about that. At the site, there's also land available that we could put a St. Joe 2 of comparable size there in the future if we wanted to. It is currently interconnected into the PJM grid, but there is the opportunity with not too far of a distance to interconnect that into MISO, so it kind of sits in an important kind of in-between phase. And so there's a lot of possibilities in the future around this site. It's also located on a really phenomenal gas infrastructure. So we talked about the issues the East Coast is facing around gas pipeline constraints. I think you can tell from the operating history, this particular facility doesn't experience those types of gas restrictions. So it's really located in a very good spot. So we're super excited about that and excited to be partnering with Wabash. You know, we have our history together with the Holland operating plant where we both are 50% owners in that. And so we have experience with co-owning and operating a natural gas combined cycle facility, and we'll build on that. We expect this will close early this year. So Wabash Valley and Aries, the current owner of the facility, were required to get FERC approval, and because they're both under FERC jurisdiction and they've both received that, so FERC gave the okay. Hoosier and Wabash, we have to get approval from the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, known as a Certificate of Need for New Generation. And that process has gone really well. We didn't have any interveners that objected to our acquisition of it. We expect the commission to issue its final ruling maybe next month. So all is going well with that. An update on Palisades. The Palisades nuclear plant, the restart of that facility, hit several really important milestones this past year. So very important to this plant getting up and going and restarted is having enough funding for all of the restart activities, which are not inexpensive. And so this past year, Holtec, the owner of the facility, received its Department of Energy loan guarantee of $1.5 billion. And so without that, the restart couldn't have happened. So that was super important. The state of Michigan also committed $300 million in grants towards the restart of the facility. So that was important. And Holtec invested $400 million of its own money into the facility. So that was the funding that was needed to get the restart going. The restart outage is well underway, and they currently have around 1,200 workers on site at the plant working on the outage. Once the plant is officially restarted, the workforce levels will be around 600 full-time employees. And I always find it kind of interesting, around 150 of those are security. And so I'm sure from next door, you don't go too far without seeing an armed guard, and they're not there to protect you as a person, they're there to protect the equipment. Anyway, that's well underway. As far as where they're at with full-time workforce, they're over 550 of those positions are already filled. They had a number of folks that wanted to come back to the facility who had worked there in the past that were excited about the restart. So that is all on track. We also finalized our share of the output. So that was one of the things that Wolverine and Hoosier needed to work through. We always knew that Wolverine, because of the state funding commitment to the project, would take the majority of the output. So we will take 46% and they'll take 54%. And we're very happy with that outcome. So that went really well. So around this, I'll also mention that we were awarded New Era funding grant award, and related primarily to our Palisades purchase power agreement. And our total award was $677 million. And so we're very excited about that. But the asterisks around it is that we know the new administration is looking to undo a lot of the funding that came under the Inflation Reduction Act under the prior administration. And so we're working with NRECA to understand, what does it mean that the new administration has paused any disbursements under those programs? My question was, does that mean that they've paused obligating any new funds? They've already obligated funds to us. Or does it mean that even if it's been obligated, they're going to review everything? We don't know the answer to that yet. We're only hours into the new administration. So more to come on that. I would say, though, when we looked at the Palisades opportunity, we did not assume any grant funding or awards. We looked at the economics and made it stand on its own. And so anything we're talking about from New Era only improves upon that. And so it was a good deal without New Era. It's just better for the members if we do get New Era. And we're going to continue to pursue that pretty diligently. Wolverine also received an award for their portion of Palisades as well. So both G&Ts did. So where do we stand from our long-term needs from an energy perspective with St. Joe and Palisades, as well as our existing resources? And when you look out over the next 20 years, the black line that you see represents our forecast of member energy requirements. And that is something that we work together with all of the members on through the power requirement study process. So this represents our joint view of what needs are going to be in the future. Obviously, this would be before any type of mega load. No members are assuming, Hoosiers not assuming that we get some mega load. That's hard to predict, right? We can't do that. So this is normal load growth. And you can see that with the addition of St. Joe and Palisades, in addition to what we already have, we're really well positioned into the future from an energy needs perspective. Two things, when you look at the early years, you'll see, wow, it looks like you have a lot of extra energy. That's true, but St. Joe hasn't closed yet and Palisades hasn't restarted yet. So I think that gives us a little bit of buffer if there's a delay in either one of those. As soon as those become more nailed down, we'll be looking to maybe sell off some of that excess to bring some financial benefits back to the members. It's also very hard when you look at resource opportunities to match them up with the exact timing of when you need them. Right. So these opportunities came to us a little bit before we needed them, but we certainly didn't want to pass on them. So we'll work to rebalance that. The other thing, you see the slight dip there from 28 to 29 in the member requirement. And when we think about our resource portfolio transition, where we started in 2019, before we made the decision in early 2020 to step away from Merom Station and head towards a more diverse resource mix, you can see that we were starting from a place where, from an owned versus contracted standpoint, the vast majority of our resources were owned, and that was dominated by Merom Station. So 2 units in one place. We knew in the early years that we would have more contracts than owned resources as we try to give ourselves time to step into potential ownership of smaller size resources in the future. So 2023 is a snapshot of that. So you can see we kind of shifted more the other way, where we have had more contracted than owned. When we look at 2030, with the inclusion of Palisades in the blue section and inclusion of St. Joe in the green section, you can see that we come to more of a balanced approach with regard to what we own versus what we contract for. So there's not a specific target that we're heading for. We're just looking to be not overly reliant one way or the other, because both pose a risk to members. And then when we look at fuel type, another lens to think about diversity through, again, you can see that we had been very coal dominant in the past. Again, when we look out to 2030, much more diverse with the inclusion now of nuclear for the first time in our portfolio, a significant increase in our renewable resources for energy, and then also more natural gas. The one thing I would like to point out about that 48% natural gas, especially with my earlier comments about the pipelines and some of the issues around getting pipeline infrastructure in place, is that this is St. Joe's. So that's the inclusion of that. We've talked about it's in a really good spot from a pipeline standpoint. So this is not reliant on new construction of gas pipelines. The other thing is the 48% is comprised of not only St. Joe, but Holland, our Lawrence and Worthington peaking stations. That's diversity of technology. Peaking versus combined cycle, they're on different gas lines. So there's a lot of diversity that's underneath that gas portion of our portfolio. And finally, it would not be one of these meetings if I didn't share with you what our rate outlook was. I don't think you'd let me get by with that one. But this is from the business plan that was most recently approved by the board in November. And you can see that last year, we saw about a 1%, a little over 1% decrease in our average wholesale rates to members. Now, this is the average. I know you all, because of your composition of your sales, tend to be lower than this, maybe $5, $6 lower than this. But this is for all members, and this is inclusive of all of our trackers and our Merom fixed charge. So there's nothing else that you would add to these to get the all-in cost. So we were about 1% lower last year. As we look into the current year, we think from 2024 to 2025, we're going to be down about $3 on average, or about 3.5%. And that has already started with the tracker that we're going to be billing for this month in January. I think it's going to be about $2.50 less than it was last quarter. So that's real. We're already starting to pass that through. I often get questions about how confident I am in those later years. I'm more confident in 25 than I am about 26 or beyond. I think we all know now that the global energy dynamic has impacts on us that we don't control here at home, just like we saw with the war in Europe. So I like to say I have a lot of confidence in these numbers, but I think there's more of a risk that they go up than they come down, just because of where we're at as a nation from a supply standpoint. These numbers do not include potential benefits of that new ERA award that I mentioned. Again, because it's a little bit uncertain, we didn't include them in our base projections. If we're successful in retaining the full $677 million, when all of that would come into our rates, these rates would be about $4 a megawatt hour lower once a year. So that gives you order of magnitude, very meaningful, which is why we're spending a lot of time on our own and within our ECA to do what we can to keep those.
You might mention how that's going to be paid. You know, a lot of people don't understand how the 677 would be, you know, that's over the 20-year time.
Yes, so the way that actually gets paid in the form of grant awards back to Hoosier, it lines up with the purchase power agreements that we have. So it's primarily Palisades. We do have a couple of small solar PPAs that were part of our application, but it's predominantly Palisades. So that would be paid back to us over 20 years. As we make the payments on the purchase power agreements, then we would get grant proceeds. So we $677 million all on day one. It'd be nice if we did. So we would return that back as we received it. So with that, I'm going to ask Rob what I missed before we just dive right into talk about whatever's on your minds.
I think you covered it. We're ready for Q&A.
So you're ready for a few questions then. Hopefully we got several for you. I'm going to piggyback to what you mentioned a moment ago about the new administration. What other challenges might we face or Hoosier Energy face with the new administration?
Yeah, I think it's a mix. So the challenges I think immediately are to the New ERA program. That's kind of day one. I think some of the benefits that we're hoping to see is that they will take the foot off the accelerator and maybe be able to withdraw some of the environmental regulations that have not come into play yet, but which would really have a significant impact on resource adequacy in the future. So, you know, the prior administration had passed laws around carbon emissions from natural gas and coal-fired power plants. And if those are in effect, they're being challenged in the courts right now. But if those stand up, we're going to see a significant retirement in short order of those resources, which won't help us manage new growth. So we'll have to be building to replace existing facilities and thinking about how do we build to meet new load growth. So we're hopeful that some of that will get resolved and taken care of on the positive side of things. Here at home, because we also, I think we maybe haven't talked as much about it, we have a new administration with a new Governor Braun, and I think this is going to be a very active session this year. I mentioned the energy discussion group that I'm a part of. I think what we're likely to see, and we've already seen some of this already starting to be introduced as the session's kicked off here in Indiana, but I think we're going to see Indiana look to streamline its approval process to get new generation up and going to meet large loads. So we'll see a streamlined process, but with that will come minimum requirements for the new large load to pay for the infrastructure that's going to be needed to serve them. And that's the state's way of trying to, you know, manage the risk of today's member consumers or ratepayers, if you're an IOU, getting stuck with a bill for building new infrastructure for loads that may not actually come. And so I think we're going to see that. I think we are also going to see a resolution come out of the legislature that says to MISO and FERC, we can do our part here, but you need to do your part at the federal level so that if we expedite getting new generation approved, it doesn't sit for years in your queue waiting to get approved to interconnect to the grid, because that's a big problem as far as getting new generation. So I think that we'll see that come out of the state as well. There was a recent study that came from Purdue that looked at the opportunities around small modular reactor technology in the state of Indiana. It was very positive about opportunities on two fronts, not just to be a future power supply for the state, but also can Indiana become a leader in the manufacturing supply chain for small modular reactor technology? Can we have some of that located here? I think we're going to see incentives for those types of manufacturing facilities to locate here in Indiana. So I think we'll see something around that, as well as some incentives for IOUs. Basically, it doesn't apply necessarily to us to fund some of the initial research about implementing SMRs on their front. So it's going to be really active here in the state, and I don't want to lose sight of that in addition to what's going on at the federal government. I don't know, I don't think it's any coincidence that Meta and Google and Microsoft are all very big Trump supporters now. I think we're going to continue to see bills that will come out to facilitate the deployment of AI, and how that impacts energy around it remains to be seen. There's a lot of ideas, but not a lot of what does that look like, right? Yeah,
You have no idea.
yeah.
Talked about the emissions. Is that why St. Joe's was willing to sell after only being, is it 6, 7 years old?
Oh, great question. Yes. So with St. Joe, the current owner, Aries, that's their business model, is to actually develop and construct these facilities and then sell them. They're not a utility as we are. And so they'll take that capital and they'll do something similar someplace else. So yes. And as a matter of fact, Rob and I talk about it. We think we just kind of slipped in with Wabash under the wire because there's all kinds of people interested in that facility right now. So we're very much, let's get that deal closed before, because I think others would probably come in and pay more for it than we're going to have to pay for it.
Absolutely. We've had some conversations with other utilities that came up to us and asked if, we were part of St. Joe's and responded appropriately. And they said, you beat us by 2 weeks. We were 2 weeks behind you on that transaction. And another interesting point around St. Joe's and that timing of it coming online in 18 and then it not necessarily transacting until first part of this year, 25. Had it not been for the COVID portion, they probably would have marketed that sooner. So their business model is more of a 3 to 4 year flip when they build, but they got caught right at the beginning and then COVID started the early part of 20 and it delayed things for Aries.
And I saw your coal is projected to be 2030. That kind of lines up with a dip in the existing resources. Is that Merom, the contract with them ending? Does that line up there? Or what's...
Yeah, actually in 2030, we wouldn't have any arrangement carrying forward. What that really is we always project that we'll be buying some of our energy in the market just because it'll be more economic. And so we look at that and we say, there's going to be coal generation in MISO for the foreseeable future. So I think more than anything, that's just a reflection there, as opposed to us having a specific contract with a coal facility.
You may
Renewables, where are they coming from? They come from solar, windmills?
Our renewables are actually a combination. So we do have wind, we do have solar, we will have some more solar that'll be coming on, and we actually have a little bit of hydro. So a very little bit of hydro, but yeah, so it's really a mix for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I started to say, so Hoosier is part owner at St. Joe, you and Wabash, Hoosier and Wabash.
We will be.
Will
Yes, yes,
when it
yes.
closes. I was under the understanding that Palisades was the same. That is not, Hoosier does not own Palisades.
No, Hoosier will not own Palisades, so Holtuck will continue to own the facility. Hoosier and Wolverine signed purchase power agreements to take all of the output from the facility. Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Which explains the portfolio that I didn't understand.
Yes.
And then secondly, Brett and I were talking earlier and I was sharing my opinions with him, whether he wanted to hear them or not. I believe small modular reactors are the silver bullet. That's just a personal belief. I think that's what is going to be a solution to a lot of perceived problems. With what you have done on the Palisades, and it may be too early to tell, has that loosened or diminished anyone's reluctance to even venture into that arena to talk about nuclear? Are you seeing the hesitancy reducing as a result of some major players doing something like that?
I think that, well, I think from a Palisades standpoint, Palisades is very positive because one of the, Holtec has been in the business of acquiring these facilities that were going to retire and decommissioning them. That's their business model. And so they were approached by the administration of the state of Michigan saying, don't start decommissioning that too fast after they bought it. We would like to see it restart. So this is something new for them. Why would they go down that path? One of the reasons is because they are developing an SMR technology. And to site that at an active nuclear facility gives them a lot of time advantage to actually place those and test them in an active nuclear facility provides a lot of benefit to them. That's what they see the future. They see the future in SMR technology and their technology in particular. So I think that it's a very big positive. I would say in the conversations that I've had around our participation in Palisades, it's been very positive. I've not heard, pushback as far as, oh, nuclear. Now, I know that's out there from general public just because there's a lot of missing information about how safe nuclear really is. And there are these views that the nuclear waste is some big behemoth amount of waste. It is so small, the president of Holtec International will say, if you took all of the spent fuel in the United States, it would fit on 2 football fields. And right now, all of that is stored at each individual operating site and is owned by the federal government. At Palisades, from its history, you would walk by it and you wouldn't even know what it was if somebody didn't tell you what it was. So I think there needs to be a lot of education in the public about how safe it really is and the benefits of it. I'm with you. I think the SMR is fantastic because you can add it in smaller pieces. You can locate it in different places. It doesn't necessarily, not all of the SMR technologies have the same water requirement. Some of them have very little water requirement. I just think there's a lot of potential there.
Well, the presentation at your annual meeting last April was just eye-opening. I thought it was just incredible when they talk about the nuclear waste and the low volume of it and the safety features and about how if you go to your dentist and you have x-rays, you're getting greater. I mean, it just dispels a lot of those perceptions that are out there. And again, the small modular reactor, it's not the big albatross over there that everybody drives by and goes, oh my gosh, I can see it 10 miles away. I just think perceptually, and I think the education piece is going to be huge, but that's just my personal belief. At your annual meeting, I thought that was just absolute.
Well, I think Kelly's going to be back with us this year, so.
I think Donna, what he's saying is if you guys need to leave, some property future for SMRs, his backyard.
Yeah.
That's what I took it to be.
I'm not a NIMBY person, not backyard.
Isn't there another interconnect or some capacity there for them to experiment or use the SMRs at the Palisades facilities? Is there some opportunity there, as I remember?
There is. So they're looking at their design, I think, is just over 300 megawatts, I think, per unit, just above that. And I think their game plan is to look at maybe putting 2 of those at Palisades. I think there's the ability to do that. So. And that was the Purdue study that I mentioned earlier around opportunities in Indiana. That's one of the things it mentioned, to really move this forward in the state. There's going to need to be public outreach and information and education about today's food.
I think the education piece is huge.
Yeah.
So we've had a lot of conversation about mega loads, and we've had little conversations even here concerning popcorn. I guess one question is there any movement on that project? And number 2, is the interest in locating in Indiana, is that specific to Indiana, or are neighboring states having that? Or is it because the state has done such a great job of, trying to market the state? Or are we really going to have a data center every 50 miles or whatever, crazy number that is?
I would say so. The G&T managers, my peers, we just met to talk about this last week. And it's an issue across the United States. In some ways, Indiana may be a little bit out in front. Some say it's coming. It's not quite there yet. But there are states that are beyond us. Virginia is a huge player. As a matter of fact, Virginia's gotten to the point where we can't accommodate anymore. We've got to think about what is going to happen with generation. And so I would say it's everywhere. So I don't think that they're picking Indiana just for Indiana. I think that, but what they are looking at is they're looking at how quickly can they get resources And it's funny how the discussion is no longer around, it's gotta be green, it's gotta be 24/7, it just has to, it's whatever you can get it. We don't care if it's gas, we just want it to be quick. We just want it to be quick. So I think they're looking at Indiana to see where are the interconnections, where can they have access to generation? How quickly can they do that?
So that combined with a new administration, do you think that that is some reprieve for coal? I mean, are there planned retirements that are maybe going to be delayed now? Is that possible? What are coal prices now? We don't talk about that anymore. We know what coal.
Yeah, coal prices have come back down to the levels pre-pandemic. So they're back to that $40 a ton kind of price range. Part of that's due to the demand of coal. But if you look at the coal plants, I mean, the issue that's at hand, even without the large mega loads that are coming, is the fact that we're already showing on the slide about NERC, the orange coloring, right? So the resource adequacy is already a concern. So anything that you take off now is just going to make that orange turn closer to red. And then if you use a power plant that's existing and you use that energy for a mega load, and it's not for a load serving entity like Hoosier that serves a membership or serves the customers / members out there across the state, you're now taking that deficit and making it worse. So the conversation around retiring coal is more along the lines of what are you going to replace it with and how long is it going to take to make that replacement? So we've talked about this in the past, but really any existing power generating facility, the value component's in the interconnection piece. So where it ties onto the grid, not to mention how quick can you replace that if you're trying to cover the needs of a membership or cover the needs of the consumers if you're an IOU. So is it going to possibly slow the retirement of coal? It probably will. I don't know it's going to be directly related to mega loads. It's going to be related to how quick is the next round of generation going to be constructed. You know, one thing that we talk about a lot is I use a term, there's not been a lot of dirt moving in the last 5 years. Right? You don't see a big power plant being built somewhere. You don't see a lot of small power plants being built. You see some solar being constructed. The solar, you know, has about a 23% capacity factor. So it runs 23% of the year in southern Indiana. Solar will produce energy, but what about the rest of the time? So there's gonna have to be a push somewhere for generation to be constructed before you start seeing a large round of retirements.
So is it fair to say that most of these data center mega loads are all asking to be non-interruptible?
Yes. The level of redundancy that they're looking for is pretty robust. So when they talk about $600 or 800 megawatt mega loads, you're really talking about a $30 to $50 million transmission investment just to get the level of redundancy that they're looking for. And that also includes their plans to have some backup generation on site that they would pay for. That's why you see utilities and others asking them to bring their own capacity, their own generation, or a contract of some nature with them to the table. Otherwise, you could have that stranded cost if they decide to go elsewhere after you've already made an investment of that magnitude.
My question kind of piggybacks on that. As Jason brought up, our local, it was in the paper that our site is data center ready. And as you said, the load there for mega load. And my question is, you said we do have additional sites at St. Joe's. How quickly could Hoosier add to that plant? Say they do build something here and they want to get started. How fast could we provide generation if we had to?
Yeah, that's an outstanding question. If you think of it, if there was no red tape and there were no permitting and there was nothing that needed to be done outside of the control of those who are going to build it, you could build a plant exactly like St. Joe 1 in probably 24 months. Now, the issue is you have to get an interconnection agreement with MISO, a generator interconnection agreement. Right now, to get in line for that agreement is probably a 4 to 5 year window if things go well. There's also a lot of people, I'll use the same term, in line to purchase generator sets, natural gas generating units, if you will, globally. You see a lot of interest from Iran, places of that nature that are trying to get in line at Siemens Westinghouse or General Electric to go ahead and buy those machines. So now that queue or that line is another 4 to 5 years. So realistically, if you add everything back into that equation on what would take 24 months to actually just build it, you're probably talking somewhere in that 5 to 7 year range. That's why it's so important in that the mega load brings some sort of generation with them, because if we were to make that kind of commitment, it takes 7 years, they go somewhere else. That puts us in a very uneconomical position really quickly.
And unless a mega load already has a position in that queue to get a turbine, then they can't get that any quicker than we can. There's really no advantage to them from a time perspective if they're going to be interconnected to the grid as well. So when you hear that, well, we'll do self-generation, that doesn't really speed things up necessarily all that.
Hitting themselves in at that point.
Yeah, well, we're all competing for the same thing. And it's not just within the United States, it's globally.
So if we have 5, so the idea is to commit to building another power plant. The risk for us as Hoosier, as you said, we got 5,000 megawatts if everybody did everything. You can't really make that commitment because of the money, what it costs to build it, until somebody's willing to pay you at least a good chunk of it up front.
For the mega load, for
Megaloads,
sure.
yeah.
And we view those very differently. So, because that's such a step change, that's above and beyond our normal industrial or economic development growth. Because of the size of that, yeah, it would put a lot of risk on today's member consumers.
And since you mentioned their site there for additional, I assume you've already looked into what it would take to build one there. I'm sure, certainly you've done the homework on that as to how long that would take you.
And if you look at our new resource portfolio in general, yes, as long as St. Joe's closes and Palisades comes online, our color chart shows that we're pretty whole, but you still have some open positions out there, right? So we're already looking at opportunities in 34, 35, 40, because it takes so long. If you do want to self-build, you need to start that process really early. Our first open position's in 2030. If we had a large open position, we would be actively looking at that right now. And we would need to get in line to buy that generator turbine set, get the queue position, our generator interconnection. That also, before I leave that topic, that also ties to Jason's question around the mega loads. That's why you're seeing more announcements and more folks like Meta and Google and Microsoft of the world talking to current owners of power plants, and especially those that aren't load serving entities, that don't have customers, that are maybe merchant plants, wanting to buy that plant or partner with them to take that load. And that you see more of those articles coming out now than what you ever have in the past.
One of them about 3 Mile Island.
Yes, that was one of the announcements.
Yeah.
Just a general observation and question, when you're talking about the energy portfolio. So you don't think the renewables are going to more than double between now and 2030? The projected, I mean, do you think that's fair to say it's going from 9 to 15? I just thought that was a slow increase compared to what we hear, even not just solar, but with hydro and wind. That projection, that caught me off guard to think it wouldn't at least double in the next 8 years.
Yeah, I think that's very realistic. I think from even from a footprint, that's realistic. The thing about the announcements that you hear in the public so much about the renewables is, for example, they're talking about, oftentimes the big splash is about, okay, well, what is the total nameplate capacity? So say a solar farm is 200 megawatt, a 200 megawatt solar farm. That sounds really big. What does that equate to in terms of the energy that it can actually produce over a year? It's what? Less than 40%?
Less than 40%.
Less than 40%. So when you look at the energy you actually get from that big announcement, it's pretty small. So it takes so many of those. So they may be increasing from a nameplate, but their actual contribution to what's needed is pretty small.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's not what you get from the news. That's not what you get from all these headlines about.
Or even local.
Yes. Yeah.
How about a tracker? Maybe we've gone over it and I've missed it. It's very possible. But, what are we kind of looking at as a tracker? I know right now we're getting ready. We're going to drop 2.5. I think you said in your presentation. So is that's for Q1? And then what are we thinking about for Q2? For tracker?
I would say over the course of the year, so it'll initially be 250. We think it's going to average about $3 lower for the entire year. So that gives you order of magnitude. So we're seeing the first big step.
We got those numbers too of how that their estimates relate to our calculation that for the rest of the year. Few months.
Because when we implement the new rates in 26, the track, everything's going to zero, right? That was the plan.
Yeah, if everything on that day is exactly as we projected it when we were doing the rate design, it will be zero.
Zero.
I will tell you, I'm 99.9% sure it will either be a small charge or it'll go one way or the other, but we're good, but not that. But yeah, but the theoretical is you zero it out and you reset your base to say that is what our base energy cost is, and then we'll track from that.
And we're going to do similar.
What other questions might we have?
I have one more like totally random, like
Certainly.
off the wall. So so you guys have done a great job at Hoosier of managing your healthcare costs because you're a self-insured. You have a self-insured health insurance deal. So here, that's one of our like, that's a huge increase for us all the time. Something we're always. So has Hoosier ever thought of expanding that self-insurance program to distribution systems members?
I don't recall that we've looked at that. We may have done that early on. We haven't looked at it recently as far as
Because if it's working, because it seems like it's working really well for you guys. What if it was like for the entire system? Would that be something that distribution systems could participate in and maybe help combat that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, let me do some follow-up with Chris Black and then he'll remind me what that.
I'm sure that there's a reason that, I don't know, I just thought of that the other day. I thought, well, that's working so well for you all on your scale. Why wouldn't it work on an even larger scale across the whole?
How many employees are at Hoosier Energy?
So we're at about 280. It used to be, so when we started that, we were at well over 400. So we had our Merrim station.
Do you have any idea what the numbers would escalate to if they did include?
No, I would have no idea. But if there's 17 of us, we have what 30-ish votes here. We're smaller, but I mean, it's not like. I don't know what that number would be.
It'd be much bigger.
That's pretty significant.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it would be.
Sure.
Look at it and we'll leave it, and we'll either be able to say, yeah, that's not the greatest idea because of this, or we'll say, that's pretty interesting.
And then you can get your big check, to fill out and pull. But
Yeah, you don't bring the big check.
I still want you to bring the big check.
I always say you can't see me with a big check. I'm just sure.
This HSA, it just doesn't feel real, right? When it goes into your account, it's like, where's the big check?
Any other questions, Jason?
No.
Well, on behalf of the board, we truly thank you for coming to this with us and sharing.
John, I'd like to thank you and Rob for your guys' leadership. We think about the priorities for our GNT at Decatur, and it's obviously rates, right? And it's obviously 1/18 of a voice, 1/17 of a voice. And I've been going to Hoosier now for 10 years in March, and I would say that we have more voice than ever. And we just saw a snapshot of our rates, so thank you both.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
You always know where to find us. You don't have to wait till next year.
All right. Safe travels.
Thank
you.
Thanks.
If you're on.
Thank you for going, I appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
See you, Rob. See you guys. Yeah, we need a little.
I got you. Sure. Okay, we got a 1 minute break. Sure.
All right, the next item on the agenda then is for your information. Do you have any questions, comments?
Ready. Enter all the invoices now, so I, or you ask, I need to look.
This trimming deal, this is the latest and greatest, like talked at the budget meeting, we're gonna get us a new one, and this is it.
That's all new forecast. So all the numbers, even future 26, 27, 28, 29, those are all recalculated based upon the average of the last three.
So there's no, it's all side cut.
For 25, your mowing is the orange.
Yeah.
And then the blue is cutting and mowing.
Completed.
Green means it's complete.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, I don't know that we ever changed the verbiage really on it.
Okay.
I mean, we're basically tree trimming on in 25, whatever they trim, they mow, and then we're mowing the rest of the system. But as you saw, when you guys brought that new point stuff forward, we were able to drop out a year on that. So we went from an 8-year cycle to a 7-year cycle now. As long as all of our assumptions hold true.
Anything else from, for your information? Nodding. Everybody good? Okay. Let's go into the next item is the approval of the previous meeting minutes from our board meeting on December 18th of 24.
I need a motion to approve.
So
First,
Carl, second.
all in favor, say aye. Aye. Voting say that it's unanimous. Next, Brett, CEO update.
Yeah, so the first thing I wanted to start with was kind of about, if you guys remember, I think it was what, 3-4 years ago, we met with Brian Singletary. We did a strategic plan. The theme around that strategic plan was really about adding value to our members. And so, new services and things to add value to our members. So I kind of wanted to give you a picture of kind of the timeline of the things that we're working on and when the next time we would do a strategic plan would really be and why, the strategy behind this. And really, if you think about, so all the things that we came up with as far as projects underneath that strategic plan, like I said, the theme was really around adding member value. We kind of feel like at this point, fiber is that, right? So at this point, we've kind of not doing anything on that strategic plan. And I wanted to show you a timeline of kind of why. With the caveat that we are doing the fiber project. So it kind of is doing that strategic plan. So, you know, we're working on the cost of service study. Matt just emailed Larry last week. So since we have now our financials, we'll start getting him some of the information. So we're going to be working on that cost of service study and our new rates, which obviously have to be implemented before April 1st of 2026. So that's going to be one of our focus areas. Second focus area is what I told you, obviously fiber project phase 1. You know, we have to have it built by September of 2026. But on top of that, we are working on what I'm calling a strategic execution process. It's really taking our company focuses, creating some leading indicators and having our visual management boards. And it's really just perfecting and documenting the strategies that we do for our core company functions and being able to measure those and being able to stand at a whiteboard and say, okay, is our strategy working? And this is like a week to week thing, right? Is our strategy working this week or not, right? Or do we need to pivot and do something differently? So this is something I've been wanting to implement for 8 years. And so I'm going to do this. I'm going to get this done. This is something that once we get a little bit closer, we actually have kind of a kickoff meeting with my, it's something that we started with the Toyota, those guys coming in, helping us, and it's kind of been sitting on the sideline. So it's something that I'm going to be focusing on getting done. When we get the finished product in, I'd love to have you guys come in and take a look at it so you know kind of what we were doing. But it's really all about what is our strategy for the core focus areas, things like reliability, safety, financials, things like that. And how are we measuring those day to day and pivoting? So that's through 25. And then obviously part of our technology roadmap, you guys, we are moving forward with obviously the RF meter implementation. So that's going to be going on at the same time. And then you stick on there the fiber project phase 2, which hopefully will exist, right? So you can see these things that are already on there are long lead, going to take a lot of our resources. And so kind of where I'm predicting is let's leave the strategic plan that we had already in place. You know, fiber is really going to meet that need. Not saying that we don't bring some of those ideas maybe forward in future strategic plans, but fiber really is meeting that need. And so what I'm saying is we probably won't develop another strategic plan together with the board until probably late 27. And so I wanted to bring this up just so everybody knows kind of what our strategy has been or is and why. It's just because we have a lot of things going on that are really focuses around what we're trying to get done. So, is there questions on that? All right, next, you guys all got our project list for 2025. There's a thing in there. So I just wanted to run through those real quick. There is 2 changes that are going to be made. So I don't know that I usually just have you guys approve this list. I'll probably do that next month because we're still working out the meter replacements. I really want to get the timing. We know what the budget is, obviously you proved that, but to get the timing and the milestones from the contractor, we don't have all those details yet. So that one, and then the building project, originally we were thinking we were going to bring that in by June timeframe. That might be July or August. So we're kind of trying to figure out the details on that too. So anyways, I'll start at the top. Core company, that's basically our safety improvement plan. I already went through that. I don't have these up on the screen either. So if you want to follow along, you can. 2 is our pole replacement. 3 is we are gearing up to really get back on these meter pits. Not that we weren't working on them last year, but there's just a lot of members that we've met with. We need to get those pushed through and put some time, effort on those. So that is on there. 35-year construction work plan. Obviously, we need to get that to be able to do any type of funding for any future work. Apply for BEAD. 7 is successful implementation of phase 1 fiber build. 8 is the RF meter project. 9 is the strategic execution process that I already talked about. 11 is the cost of service study. 12, we are working as part of this strategic execution process. We really have no way of measuring day to day our member satisfaction. We have to wait every 2 years to get a number from our ACE. I forget what the name of that is, but basically to get our number for how we're doing. And so as a part of the business that we already pay for with Inside Information, we're going to be doing transactional surveys. So it's no different than if you go to Walmart or you go to somewhere to buy something and you get a survey through your email, we'll be doing the same thing. So anyone that has a new service, any type of work order we create, we'll be sending out a survey so we can get some measurable results weekly, if not daily. Broadband project. So 13 is really trying to figure out what our manning is going to look like long-term. 14 is the building. 15 is an SOP project that we've been kind of working on, but really just tracking our critical SOPs, making sure those are done. 16 is our 10-year financial forecast. Matt's already started working on that. 17 is, we've been talking about, we used to in our staff meetings, we would have a budget review. This is something that kind of came from the goals that you guys gave me too, as far as focus being budgeted. But having some type of weekly review process with Matt right now is just kind of meeting with them individually. So that may be what we do, or it may be something we do in staff. And then 18, we do have Windows 11. This is a pretty big change that we got to do across the entire company to go to Windows 11. So those are the 18 projects that we have at this point.
Is 19 upgrading in here?
I didn't put that on here because it was so small. He's actually already ordered stuff for this.
Could be, I gotta change how you guys get your order packet too. But that's
Yeah.
That's gonna be a major project for me.
And the new IT notification that I got we talked about, is this a phishing thing? That was legit.
That was legit. The only confusing part is so we've done some changes. We've done some server work. There's been a lot of patching work and everything from an IT standpoint now that we got Bob on. He did not get a notification that his password was changing. You got one that your password was changing and it wasn't changing. So something goofy's there. Steve talked to.
But I did,
That was legit though.
It was legit.
because I have never gotten one of those before.
I haven't either, and I was scared to press the link through there. So,
It's legit.
so I went to a regular way, but I'm like, am I gonna get like called out?
So I went to.
Because I've never received.
On his name, and that's how I knew.
Yeah, it is. It's legit. It's good.
So that one's legit. So I think
You did get
No, it isn't not.
that. So did that have to do with the update?
How do you even remember fishing?
Okay.
Well,
yes.
I-
He's doing all that work. All your notifications
I
have not come from Sam anymore.
I figure if I don't go through the link and change it, it's
Yeah,
okay.
but
Walk down the hallway, is this is safe?
They made that change. Sam did.
I didn't.
You'll start getting all your notifications.
And once I got on and did the old fashioned way, it said to download, but I didn't download it. I was scared.
You're good on that one.
But how do you report fishing on?
Text.
I would just text Sam or delete it. On our computer, there's a report phishing.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying, and you,
I don't know on iPads if there is.
exactly. On a computer, you can.
Just delete it.
On,
We probably could.
well, I went to the org chart to see if his name was on, and it was, so I'm going, okay, it's legitimate.
Jason asked me about it yesterday and I said, go look at the email address, number one. Because a lot of times if it's phishing, that email address will be goofy, right? It won't come from the actual person. But I did check on it. No, it's real. Any other questions on projects? Just to give you a little bit of update on the fire bill, obviously we just did our public announcement. So BEAD application is in process. Obviously, we're making some good headway on that. It is due February 12th, which of course we'll try to get that. We'll submit it before the 12th just because you don't want to have some there's a lot of documents you have to upload. So just like we did last time, we'll start uploading those. But everything is on track for that. Our RFP for Make Ready Construction was sent out on the 16th. So our goal is to have the selection. This is our construction contractor that we're going to go with to build the fiber backbone and all that. We've sent out all the RFPs on the 16th. I think there was around 50 companies that we sent to. Selection, we have to have completed by 2/14. So that's our kind of our big next deadline. Design's about 50% completed, with completion on January 1st, but that's all for all the DAs in that first level. So there's 6 different DAs, right? And so that basically they took the entire area and divided it into 6 sections, and they designed those one at a time. And so they'll all be done by June 1st, and we're about 50% done on that. Make ready construction to start in February, starting with obviously DA1. So we'll actually start in February timeframe doing make ready stuff. Some of that's going to be done in-house. Some of that's going to be done by a make ready contractor. And then we are working on a dashboard, and I was going to put it up on the screen, but right now it's there. It doesn't have it. Anyway, so we almost have a dashboard done. It's something that we want to send out weekly to the board. It will have the budget highlights, where we're at on budget, where we expect to be. And then it'll have like the biggest milestones coming up, what percentage we are on those, and then critical path items, and then risk and mitigations. So there's one big dashboard. It's a Word document that we've almost got ready. It's what I'm going to use to manage the project, but I'll pass it along to the board because it's got some really good information in it from a week-to-week standpoint. So you can follow the milestones in that. Anything on fiber?
Yeah, I don't know if this is like the time, but I talked to James Dannenberger at the Hoosier meeting yesterday, and I asked him about the Accord cash call. Okay. They got all the money they were looking for, like right up there.
Actually, they got above it, right? Because they were looking for 4.8 and they got.
He told me 5.5 they got, so I'm not sure if that's what they were, but anyway, I just wanted you all to know that, yeah, that all went, no problem.
And that will be invoiced. Well, we've already invoiced, haven't we? Yeah, we've already paid
We're
ours.
taking care of it. I don't think we paid it yet. It'll go out next week. But I've already got the invoice in.
Any other questions on fiber?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think they were going after, was it 4.6 or 4.8?
I thought they were going after 5.2.
But he told me 5.5 yesterday.
Might have been
It's what they
5.2.
got, you said.
Yeah,
It was
said
around,
right away.
it was around.
It's no problem. They're good to go.
Any other questions on fiber? All right, so I wanted to go over from last year, just what the org chart looks like again. We did have a couple promotions to make you aware of. So this is the main one that I'll show you. We had to break Johnny's up because it's on the second page. So the first one was Jenny. So as you guys were aware, we are not backfilling the clerk position. And so Matt worked with Jenny and we gave Jenny a well-deserved promotion to senior accountant. And then the second one is Abby Asher. So Abby, we moved to senior marketing and communications. Still same structure, just basically we updated Jenny's old job description really needed to be updated with some of the stuff that she was already doing. And so we went ahead and updated it. But both of these are really just promotions, not necessarily new duties or responsibilities. Nothing changed here. I don't know that I went over this in a while, so I thought I'd kind of talk about it real quick. So essentially everybody reports up through Johnny in our organization because of the union and things like that. But there are some dotted lines, and the reason those dotted lines are in there is because those are the first points of contact for certain departments to go through. So Chris and Mark, they're going to go through. So what we're calling engineering, they're really going to go through Jenny first, right? That's kind of the first lines of communication. And then obviously if Jenny doesn't know or needs help, she'll go to Johnny. On the other side of the department, it's kind of the same thing. All the guys will go through Jeff first, right? So when we look at who do we go to in operations, it's always Jenny from an engineering side and it's Jeff from an operations side. Although everyone's still, Jenny is not doing Chris and Mark's performance reviews. It's a communication dotted line thing. So I don't know if I've explained that in the past or not, but other than that, nothing else has really changed on the operations side.
Can you make sure that's updated on dashboard or maybe that it already?
This is the newest, latest and greatest probably is not. Although I don't know. Can you check?
When you try to download, it says there's a download error.
Yeah, that's what I just tried to look at the same error. It's talking about.
Interesting.
I got it on mine.
Try yours,
How
Steve.
much would you have to pay? I got the same message Suzanne did. Yeah, I got the same message Suzanne did.
It's stopping on the org chart. I updated it about a week ago and it looks like it must be corrupt.
It's probably this iPad.
Yeah, I have it. Nobody else allowed to have it.
Is it new though? Does it say Abby Asher Senior?
Dated, no, 9/18.
Yeah. So see, it's,
Looks.
Yeah.
So when you refresh it, does it,
I don't want to.
yeah, because that's what I do. I try to open it. I'm like, well, it's not right, so I
All right.
refreshed it.
Yep.
Okay, no big deal.
All right, the other thing I was going to talk about, although it's lost a lot of steam, was Indiana Senate Bill 502. So it was Charter Communications put forward a bill. They did it kind of sneakily where it really didn't get, it wasn't publicly even accessible until it was first read. I mean, it put forth some like very stringent requirements that really would have affected us. IC has since met with, the utility committee. And I believe that this is never going to get here a reading, but I wanted to bring it up. It was again brought forth by, it's kind of interesting because it was brought forth by Charter Communications, which normally anything that has to do with pole attachments, that's brought on by one entity, your Comcast and all these others are going to join on that bill. And Comcast did not. They basically said, we did not put this bill forward. We don't support it. So kind of an interesting thing. I put it on the agenda and on this originally because I thought it was going to be a bigger deal than maybe what it is. But it went to as far as like, we have to have make ready done in like 45 days, things that are just, there's no way we could do, right, in an appropriate, there's just no way we could adhere to it. So anyways, we're still following it. IEC's got several meetings set up to make sure that it doesn't. With that said, though, IEC is if you went to the IEC annual meeting, you probably already heard this, but IEC is really redoing their grassroots. And so the grassroots, the idea of this is if we need constituents to send letters to legislators, like if this thing would happen to gone through and it's something that's detrimental to our business, we need as many people to get these emails. And it's one of those where you just put your name in, it auto populates and sends to the right people. And so they're trying to re-engage this, get as many people signed up. I think as a board member, it's critical that you are signed up. That's one of the duties and responsibilities of a director is to be politically engaged with this. So if you want to take a picture of that, you can do it later. But if you aren't signed up, I highly encourage you to get signed up for this. It's really easy. All you do is put your name, your email in there, and you'll get signed up for any emails when they enact what they call grassroots, right?
Once in like 10 years.
Huh?
And they've only done that like once.
Yeah, they haven't done it very often and they won't do it very often. It's for things like, hey, we have to, and it really does make an impact when you have a senator.
It's gonna be a disaster type.
Yeah, if you have, someone at the State House that gets 6,000 letters, they kind of say, stop sending the letters, I got it, right? So it is very impactful. So if you have not signed up, please take a picture of that and it'll take you right to the link. We keep moving, Steve? Sure. Any other questions as far as kind of my update, CEO update? If not, I'm going to move on to the metrics. So December, median temperature was about 9.7% cooler than our 5-year average. So sounds like a lot, but when you see the amount of energy, it wasn't huge. I'll lose my projector. Sorry. So yeah, if you look at we were almost basically flat as far as energy. I believe we were actually about 1.5% under our 5-year average. And then demand was about 1%. So even though we were 9.7 degrees cooler, you didn't necessarily see it come in over, this isn't budget, right? This is a 5-year average. From a residential, so this is what the year ended up looking like. don't think there's any really anomalies other than the one industry that we've been talking about that's drug those numbers down all year. Transmission looks pretty good. Commercial looked pretty good all year round. And then where we were last month was 1.29. We ended the year at 1.18 above budget. So congratulations, Jenny. That's pretty incredible to come that close to sales projections. And Matt, sorry, Matt.
I'm not going to take the credit.
Really, from a year standpoint, and I hate to say this because this is about the last couple of years I've said this, it's really no big blips. I mean, we had that hurricane. I know, knock on wood, right? We had the hurricane, and that was probably the closest to a blip. But nothing really major this year. Lost consumer hours for December, we were about a little above what our 5-year average is. And then again, number of outages, we were basically flat. These were year-end numbers for our crew visits. We ended up at 6, our goal was 6. And then we probably eventually want to change this metric on the near misses and corrective actions, because I think what trend I see in this is when you compare it to the last couple of years. So the amount of corrective actions and the amount of suggestion and near misses is quite a bit higher than what we've seen in the last couple of years. So those are things you want, right? You want corrective actions. You want people to bring suggestions and near misses forward. So those numbers increasing year over year is a good thing. Any questions from a metric standpoint? If not, I'm going to give it to Matt for year-end financials, which you'll have to read on your iPad. That's going to be hard to read.
All right, we'll start off with the balance sheet. This is the high level. We ended the year, our net utility plant of roughly 42,742,000. So up about 145,000 per month. Total property, other investments, that is relatively stable. It is up though from prior month due to the increase because of Hoosier's allocation. Total current and accrued assets down 600,000 for the month. That is decrease in the cash. There just wasn't much cash at the end of the month. We paid a bunch of bills. Other deferred debits, that is where the fiber is going, as well as the construction work plan. So that number has jumped each month, and it's significantly higher than years past. Any questions on the asset side of things before I move to the liabilities? And I know you have the more detailed stuff. If anybody has any questions on the detailed stuff. All right, next we have liabilities and equity. Total margins up 473,000, or equity margins up for the month. Long-term debt relatively stable. We did make a payment in December. Total current accrued liabilities, that is up 500,000. That is due to the increase. We do a bunch of accruals year end for anything that we know is coming, but we haven't necessarily got. And then other deferred credits, as historically doesn't move hardly any. So any questions on the liability side of the balance sheet? All right, so here is where the statement of operations. So as you can see, our year to date, our operating revenue about 40 million, which is real close to where we budgeted, within 1.2%. Same with power costs, since they follow each other pretty well. Right in line, we're 1.2%, and we were 1.18 above budget. So that tells me that we were pretty darn close there. Controllable expenses, there is a difference there. We came in at 6.5 versus 6.9 was budgeted. And part of that is labor and benefits are under by about 207,000 across the entire company. And that's due to job openings throughout the year. We had several people come and go. And then the right-of-way maintenance budget, it's under by about 292,000. The contractor's running behind, and we did charge them $50,000 in late penalties in 2024. So
And they paid them.
So I figure if they want to take 3 or 4 extra months they can. So, because I calculated it up, it was right at about $50,400 they paid in penalties in 24. And we're charging them, they paid a bunch in January too, so we're sending them a bill every week till they get done. So I feel like that's pretty good. At least if they ain't gonna get done, at least our contracts have teeth, so. Fixed expenses, that's a little bit over. That mainly rolls into your depreciation, just how fast stuff gets put into the plant. So that's most of the variance there. The other, so the biggest thing I always try to look at every year is our operating margins. So our operating margin is 2.4 this year. Last year was 2.3, so we're pretty well right in line with last year. So, but we're about 400,000 above budget, which is mostly due to the rollable expenses that we talked about earlier. And then lastly, our non-operating expense is about 1.4 million. And unfortunately, most of the non-operating income is not anything you actually get cash for. It's the Hoosier allocation, and it was that accounting change where we were required to reduce the bad debt. So unfortunately, there shows to be about 1.4 million there, but there was really no money for that 1.4 million.
And
So
both of those are gone as of the end of the year. Well, the Hoosier will repeat, but I mean.
yes, but yeah, the
The accounting was through.
yes, it shows up as income on your income statement, but it's no real cash. So.
And then back on the right of way real quick. So like you said, they're behind on it. We didn't think this was a huge issue just because number one, it's not going to put in jeopardy what gets cut this next year. So we're still going to be on cycle. I am glad that we've spent the time we've spent on these contracts because they got teeth. I mean, we're charging them every week, a set amount. But the thing you got to know about is we're showing 300 under 290 under this year, which means it's going to go over to next year, right? So we'll have to pay that. We can't accrue it because the work's not done. And so it's just a timing thing more than anything. It's not going to affect our cycle or anything like that, but it is going to affect the financials for obviously this year.
It'll lower your margins next year. If
Right.
they get back, although they were behind last year, they might be behind this next year too. But then we start sending them, their contract requires them to be done by the end of November. So we've been billing them. We've already gotten paid for December. So we bill them about every 2 weeks. That's how often we're sending them. And they haven't been getting a whole lot done with the weather the way it is, so. I kind of look at it as if they're 2 months behind, it really don't make a whole lot of difference to us in the grand scheme of things.
So you ended, what, 490 cash?
Roughly, yeah.
So you're telling me that if they would have had that work done, you wouldn't have collected any money from them and you'd had another 300,000 you paid. So that number would be $350,000 lower just from the tree trimming alone.
Yeah, that's good.
So you wouldn't have had any cash left.
Yep.
But we also didn't borrow what you guys allowed us to
Yes.
borrow.
We didn't.
So we kind of knew that.
Any questions on the income statement side of things? Jason stole my thunder about where we ended cash.
Well, I mean, you send this out and the margin's 3.9 and then you have $400,000 in cash that, that doesn't equate, right?
Well,
But the allocation of Hoosier is a big chunk of that, I
Yes.
understand.
you've got between the Hoosier allocation and the accounting change, you have about a third of that. It doesn't, there's no money for it.
Yeah, it's 1.2.
Yeah.
But I do, one thing I would like to bring up, Matt's not bragging on himself here, but so you look at the budget year to date, I mean, so our controllable expense budget is $6.9 million. You back out the right of way, miss, and the open positions filled, you're $27,000 of a $6.9 million budget. I don't think you could even get that. I mean, that's incredibly close. I want to say it's like 0.03% below budget. So nice work, Matt.
I'll give Jenny.
But that's not the first time we've heard that either. I mean, that's pretty consistent that you guys are doing that.
Jenny's budgets are as good a budget as you will ever find. I will state that when I started here. I mean, she's the one who maintains that. I'm not gonna take the credit for that. She does that. She does an excellent job with that. It's the only way to describe it.
Hence the previous promotion you talked about.
But I mean, you know, in seriousness, when we go through the budget process, what you guys are doing and what we're doing, it works. I mean, it's predictable. And just maintaining, you know, what we said we were gonna do anyways. So,
And then I guess cash, as you said, ended at 427. Decreased from the month because a lot more money went out the door. We did receive the ARPA reimbursement in January. So there was a bunch of stuff. we
that
paid.
wasn't booked in here, right?
It's not. And there was a bunch of stuff paid in like December in order to make sure that
You paid it December, and you got the money back in January.
So it's not here.
Yeah, that's not, it's not reflected in here.
here.
Yeah.
But that's not gonna make an income statement difference because everything with fiber is recorded on the balance sheet. So. Here we have our distribution plant. I did rearrange how some of the things were coded from the prior month. So if you look at last month's numbers to this month's, I moved a couple of things that I felt like, in general, the pole replacements wound up being less than expected. I do think we got that done cheaper than, from what I could tell, than what we thought it'd be. Some of the distribution work plan projects, I've been following exactly how they coded in operations, just from a consistency standpoint. They moved one, so I moved it. I've been following how operations codes it. I've been following those codes because they set the codes, and if I don't do that, it can be consistent. So, then the vehicles, you got the right-of-way machine in there, and then pickup truck, other stuff there. In general, we're within 400,000 of the budget, 350.
One comment I'd like to make here too is, and these are the things that, you know, when you try to justify heads and stuff, it's impossible to show. So we had budgeted in pole replacements, $885,000, right? We did more poles than what we had budgeted for because of stuff we found over the periods of times that have just been kind of sitting around. We did more than what was budgeted as far as number of poles, and we did it at 771,000. So you ask why, right? It's because we have now, so Johnny is the operation manager, and we put Jenny and Jeff in those two places. We have more resources working on some of this stuff, which freed up Johnny to spend making sure that we're getting what the contracts say and we're getting value there. And I'm telling you, that's the only reason that went down. We threw a contractor off the system because of it. And so when we have resources focused on the things that matter, which we had to add a resource to be able to do that, these are the small things that you don't account for when you justify a head. But I can tell you as a result of that. Pretty,
Did I answer all your questions too?
you did.
Any questions, anybody?
It's a pretty good year.
Thank you.
Really.
Yeah, I think it is.
We just got a lot of money going out the door, so the cash flow looks goofy there. But again, it would have been $500,000 higher, but didn't get booked until we didn't receive it. Other than that, it's a pretty normal year.
No. We put a lot of plant in the ground
We did.
and we didn't borrow a lot of money. That's our out of the story.
But there's gonna be 25 years of
There's gonna be, yeah.
retirement.
We did borrow money.
Yeah, we did. We just borrowed from the members.
Well,
Our equities. Line up, but we're 64.
We were making a bet on the interest rates and I think it was clear to say we were
I was wrong. I'm not gonna say I'm wrong. That 1 month I came in, it dipped, when it popped back up, I'll wait and see if it dips again. It hadn't dipped. again. So I was wrong.
That's go ahead.
All right, thank you, guys. I think we're ready to go on to the old business. We talked about this last month, the donation. And you'll see, and Brett, you need to share more if you talk to Erin at all, but she gave some responses. And so I'd like the board to discuss where we're at, what you're thinking.
So verbally, I can tell you that on that last part, I mean, there is very minimal risk. I think to mitigate that risk, my suggestion. I'm going home. Thanks, Max. To mitigate any risk, my suggestion would be if you're gonna cut it off, you give them a year or so. Let them know beforehand. But even though I don't have the formal written letter from Erin yet, I can tell you that what she said is there's really minimal risk.
Minimal risk.
Either way.
Did anybody get with IDEM and find out whether or not they was doing, because at the beginning it was, IDEM did half of it and we did half of it. That's where I got out first of it, so.
Actually, Aaron told us if you aren't going to change anything, don't contact IDEM. You're just going to, we were advised not to I mean, it depends on what you guys want to do.
You're opening a can of worms when you get with IDEM.
Yes.
I can tell you that.
You know.
So.
I don't know that I personally had an appetite to stop doing it. I just wanted to know what the option was if we did at some point decide that we wanted to, like, do we have to do this forever? And I think what you found out is no. But if we want to discontinue it at some point, we're going to have to give some advanced notice, obviously.
Just from a courtesy standpoint, I think.
And do they send us a, billing saying we owe $1,700? It is $1,700 a year.
Yeah. So no, the way it happens is we send them a normal bill every single month.
Okay.
Just what we do is they don't pay it every month. So we send them a bill every single month. And at the end of the year, one of the council member or commissioners come in and Crystal will take the total for the year and do a bill adjustment to cut it in half.
Okay.
And then they come in and write a check. And that's how it all gets booked. So it doesn't even really get booked through like financials, like you would normally see like basically done on like you would a bill arrangement. Like, so if someone called in and said, hey, I can't pay my bill, can I do a billing arrangement? Crystal has to go in and flip the number.
So they pay it half, then we adjust the other half off.
Correct.
And it's done at the end of the year.
It's done at the end of the year. Well, I didn't know. I'm sorry. It's done in like June or July, I believe, but it's done for a year time frame.
So I heard you say, Jason, that you might have the appetite for it.
I'm okay with it for now. I just wanted to know if we were ever going to be able to get out of it at some point.
But I mean, I guess the question is if the board is thinking that maybe it's the time to do it, when is the best time then to do it? At the end of the year, but notify them prior to then? Because you said you don't bill them till the middle of the year, so I'm still a little confused.
I would say you give them a year notice. Whenever they pay their next bill, you say, hey, next year.
So a commissioner is coming in and doing this. So then that's the people that we need to have the conversation with of, hey,
Absolutely.
we need to think about who else could help with this situation so that it's not.
It's just going to come out of the county budgets. What's going to.
So they can budget for next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
The point is, this is not in perpetuity. I don't feel like this is solely our responsible until the end of time.
I agree.
And I would assume most of the board.
I mean, the RMC has done this for a number of years already.
The cumulative number that you guys asked for. It's in your closed action items spreadsheet.
Right.
Is the county on an annual, are they on a calendar year budget?
Yes.
to Suzanne's points, calendar year budget, so that if we gave them notice this year in June that we were going to do one more year, then that would be sufficient for their budgetary process.
I don't think there's any the timing that he comes in and pays that is just whenever, I mean, it was arbitrarily picked. I mean, we could cut it whenever we wanted to do it. You know what I'm saying? If you wanted to make it the end of the year of this year, then
25.
we will split whatever they owe their half and then they move on or do it next year, whatever.
We don't have to send them a formal letter saying we're not gonna do this anymore. Just,
Nothing per any of these agreements. We have to do any of that. I think it's courtesy to tell
yeah, courtesy.
them.
Especially since of the county and their budgeted item, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
We indicate 2025 is the last year and then starting January 1, 26.
And I think the history of what we've already paid being included in that notice would be beneficial.
Is there any backlash of us getting out of this agreement?
If you're wanting to do this, I probably won't do it until after we get our letter of supports for fiber, which I'm getting on February 3rd.
Because they've chucked in, what, 500,000 to us and
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, in their overall budget, is that much money really a problem? Probably not. I don't know, Steve, to answer your question. I have no idea what the optics of that'll be.
They're probably thinking the same thing. Is that part of RMC budget, that big of a deal? RMC probably
Absolutely,
thinking the same thing.
absolutely right. I thought there would be backlash on the other one that we were doing. Because
And there wasn't.
And there really wasn't.
PR.
Yeah.
Well, so we don't, I guess, necessarily have to make a decision this evening,
No,
but it's, we'll get it back on the agenda at some point in time if we want to kind of discuss it, if the board has an appetite to end that.
it's on our list every budget cycle. So this will come to you every year at budget time.
Right, I mean, and that's what prompted it in December, right? But I guess what I'm getting at is we probably want to do it a little bit.
Oh, before that. Yeah.
So,
is it June or July, whenever they come in?
exactly. I think we need to put it on our radar to have it on the agenda again, and we'll discuss it then. Fair enough? All right, sounds like a plan. The next item then has to do with the nominating committee candidates. Did we get that?
I should have mine by Friday. I have both husbands and wives deciding which one will do it. So I will have candidates that I will confirm. And can I just do it by email? Email everybody?
Sure.
Good.
So Suzanne, is the winner doing it or is the loser doing
I
it?
don't know. I need to get some. Then I just sent Jeannie a couple that I reached out that were interested, that I need to make sure their names are listed as members. I know they're on REMC, but I don't know if the husband and wife are both listed as members, so I need to make sure.
no,
No, was it?
oh my God.
Nobody at all? Okay. And Dale, you're still with, you do have two.
I have to.
So who?
I sent Jeannie a text week ago tomorrow, I believe. Second gentleman's name is Chase Schneider. And I think I asked Jeannie earlier tonight, she's already, whatever process she needs to go through to eliminate him. And he committed last Thursday night and I bumped into him Friday and he's very happy to do so. And I advised him that Joe Dekoff was also running and he knows Joe well because his family owned a feed mill in North Fernie. He said Joe used to come in all the time. So he's familiar with him. Chase is going to do it. So I
So
have
we had two. What's our deadline as far as, we got another month?
Well, no, I think it's like in the next week or two, she's got to get it into the magazine.
Okay.
I mean, you at least have another week. I know that,
Right.
but it's coming up. I mean, when we have to get that into IEC for all,
At the end of January, next Friday,
That is the end of January.
yeah, problem.
next Friday.
But you'll have something pretty quick, and so we can.
I should, yeah. I might have it tonight.
So I suppose, do we need to vote on that?
Yeah, I go ahead and vote on Dale's.
We'll vote on Dale's, and Steve, you'll see what you can do as well then. between now and that time. So I guess we need a motion to approve Dale's nominating committee.
So moved.
The first
I'll second.
and the second. And this again is for Chase
Schneider, Schneider.
Snyder and Joe Deacon. Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Okay, so those are approved. And when, Suzanne, when you get yours, you can do it through email and we'll need a approval and say what would you see. All right, going on, new business, governance work with policies. I think you can see what Brett had written, but I'm gonna have him kind of maybe talk a little bit more about it, and then we'll have a discussion on what we just talked about.
So just so y'all know, we've been working on getting every policy reviewed by this board and updates made. And so we are now that we've been through them all. So they're all on there's a couple that are on a one every year cycle because it's like red flag stuff you have to, right? But in general, everything is on a 2-year cycle. It's all in our computer software program. It comes up and tells me, hey, this one needs to be reviewed this month, right? We try to spread them out over the months for the next 2 years. So that's kind of what kicked this off, right? So we're getting ready to do our next cycle. So we know we're going to have at least one new director this year, right? And there's going to be other directors new in the future at some point in time. And if you go back and look at issues and things that we've had from a governance standpoint, there's no clear one document that states what are the duties and responsibilities of the directors? What are duties and responsibilities of management? It's just not spelled out in there. Interesting enough, when I was doing this, I found a preclude document, doesn't have a policy number, and it has exactly what I'm talking about in there. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. This stuff is directors, this stuff is management. So anyways, my thought here is when we go through these in this next cycle, number one, let's create, which already might actually be created. We just need to review it and approve it. A policy that clearly specifies what your duties are, what our duties are, right? And then if you read a lot of and I'll give you a suggestion or an example, but if you read some of our policies, they have a lot of like management stuff in it. Like there is one policy that talks about we will not allow a member to have a certain horsepower motor on there. Well, that obviously is not a board decision, right? That's not even a Brett decision. So things like that, they're in policies. Number one, it slows us down because if we have to make changes to some of that stuff, we got to go through the board to get that done. And it's like, you guys aren't going to know what horsepower motors can or can't happen. So there's a lot of things like that they're really management responsibility stuff that's been put into SOPs or into policies because a lot of these policies are just old. So my point is let's create a policy that clearly, and I think it's already created. It's just not a policy. It's a bulletin that was created way back when. And then while we go through these policies, let's remove the stuff that's SOP related, right? That's not governance and board related. And I got a couple documents from Aaron that you guys saw in there that clearly did specify like what things the board of directors should be approving, from a member standpoint. And then the other thing that's kind of interesting is there's not clear linkages between bylaws, the rules and regs, and the policies. So ideally you have, a high level requirement and a bylaw. And then it goes down to either a rule and reg or a policy. And then the policy will say, Brett, here's how you do that, right? Here's how the board wants you to do that. And then I have SOPs underneath of it that tell my people what we need to do, right? From a management standpoint. None of those linkages exist, although we have software that does all that, right? It'll actually link what it's to. So why that helps is now I can figure out, okay, when I read this policy, now I know why, without having to go through all the bylaws and now I know why it is. So all the linkages are there. So to go back, number one, again, there's not a clear policy that says who does what And for a brand new director who's never been on a board or doesn't know our business, that could be very tough to understand without a document. There are no linkages from high-level documents all the way down. And then again, there's a lot of policies that have a lot of what I consider management responsibilities in them. And it really slows us down on things because we have to come to the board instead of us just being able to approve it when it's really a management responsibility. The other idea I had is, you know, when you have, I think it would be great to have an agenda that leads in by what document, what it is that we're talking about. So if it's something with a line extension policy, let's start the discussion with what the policy says. So an example is if Jason comes to me and says, why are you charging XYZ $1,200 for his line extension policy? Give me the details of all that. I want to know why it's this, this, and this. The conversation should start with what's the policy say, right? Because what I'm going to tell him is we're charging XYZ that money because I'm following the policy that you described to me, right? So if we had an agenda that started with, here's what you're telling me to do, right? From a policy standpoint, because that's what policy and governments is all about. It's about the board delegating responsibility to me through policy. So you're telling me how to do the things that you want me to do from the member standpoint, because you're representing your members through policy. I take those policies and I divide those down into my SOPs. And those are how I communicate to my manager what my expectation is. So this isn't like a specific project that I want to put timelines around all this. All I'm saying is as we go through these, do you guys agree we should maybe go this direction so that when I start bringing these in, as they come up for review, you guys aren't surprised and like, what are we doing here? Why are we doing that? Right? So I just wanted some conversation, some feedback. Honestly, in my opinion, I think there's a ton of benefits in doing this. In fact, I asked Aaron, I don't know if I include that on here. I said, is this something that's worth time here and effort? Because it has been, this has been an issue in the past, in my opinion. It's how do you distinguish the difference between who does what? And so she came back and said, no, I think this is something you guys should do. But I think we do it over time. I don't want to allocate a resource to it. I just kind of want to do it on my spare time as I'm looking at these policies, working with whoever manages this. But I think it's something that we do over time as we hit these next 2 years up and just try to correct some of the stuff that's good.
What's the board think?
I'm very much in favor. I see a lot of benefits because I think from a new director's perspective, anything you do to streamline, help them understand what they're about to embark upon, should they be elected, is helpful.
Jordan, kind of review that document with them in the director orientation.
There is no document. There's no document that really specifies black and white what your responsibilities are. There's pieces of it in certain policies or things. There's statements like, in order for this REMC to operate well, you need to essentially stay, each of us needs standard lanes, but there's no here's your lane. There is a document out there that I did find, and it again, it's like a preclude or a pre-phase, but it doesn't have a policy number on it. I've never even seen
So
it.
I'm curious, how old is it? I mean, it just kind of came.
I can bring it up.
It came out of the woodwork. I guess the question is, it sounds like it itself needs to become a policy of sorts. Is that a good?
From what I was reading the other day on it, honestly, this may be the missing link. But I think it goes farther than that. I think there's just a lot of things in policies that they're, again, what are you going to do if I come to you and say, I don't think we should allow 8 horsepower motors anymore. We should do 6. Number one, I'm not even going to be the one talking.
I think if you want to do something around, hey, here's the responsibilities and expectations of the director versus management and your new role as a director. This is a policy. I think that's fine. I think to say that we're going to go through each policy and figure out which one is pertinent, which one's not at this time, I think seems really overwhelming. I think that's the piece that's going to be over the multi-year deal when you're bringing these policies up for review. I think that's the time to take care of them.
Well, I think that's what I'm saying. I don't want this to be a project.
But I don't Yeah, I mean, if you want to do some kind of drafted policy that, so that if we get someone new, they know what their responsibilities are, I don't would see a problem with that, but the rest of it seems very,
It's very evolutionary. It's gonna happen.
Additional work.
well, I mean, we just went through the project list. Yeah.
So Suzanne, what'd you say again?
That's a lot of additional work that not necessarily have to be done. Just
Yeah, like I said,
outlines, basic outlines are done ahead of time.
And as far as the agenda goes, I mean, aren't we already kind of doing that in the meeting? I mean, we have all the policies.
Yeah, but I think for Brett's point, it's like, are we really differentiating between operations role?
Yeah. I get that.
And one more thing, we've often said that the bylaws kind of oversee the policies, but sometimes you see interpretation, at least in my opinion, of a bylaw maybe saying something slightly different than a policy. I think it's just, in my opinion, again, I think it's good to look at those. And not all of them at one time. So, if we do two or three a month, my concern is if we have a lot of policy reviews, and we typically do that after the annual meeting. I mean, we have several.
So you guys will be reviewing the same amount of policies, no matter if we do this or not. They're going to come up every 2 years. We're on a 2-year cycle.
Exactly.
So you're going to be looking at these no matter what we do, because that's what we said we wanted to do, is to review policies every 2 years. All I'm saying is I don't want to spend time redlining something to try to take stuff that's SOP out of the SOP. If every time I bring it to you, you say, well, we're not changing that. That's all I'm asking. I don't want to surprise you by bringing you consistently every month policies that are trying to remove SOP stuff, but you got to start with a document that says, here's what's my duties and here, Brett, is what your duties are.
Right, did you find it?
No, I can't find it.
The other thing, we talked about it on the way back to Hoosier the other day, we were talking about this. And we didn't do it last year, I don't think, or maybe the last couple of times, but we used to do that deal where Brian Garrison came in the first meeting when we had new directors, and he went through this. This is your responsibility. This is management's responsibility. Like, that was part of that presentation. So I think that should happen.
And maybe that's part of all this. Yeah,
That part of the CCD courses as well.
Yeah, but I mean, what's the time? Yes, it is, but what's the timing of, if you do get someone new, how soon are they really gonna, and are they gonna go to that one first? I don't know.
I suppose
if Brett finds this document, we could start with it in some fashion. And we have a couple of policy reviews next month, which is all through. Okay.
We can put on the agenda though.
Yeah, let's do that. Like I said, if you have a policy review sorts, when appropriate.
Fair enough.
Okay, time for us looking at a Hoosier Energy Director. Currently, Jason is that person. I'll ask him if he's wanting to continue in that role.
Yeah.
But if we have other nominations, that's okay as well. So.
I'll nominate Jason.
Okay. Second. We have a first and a second. Any other nominations? Why don't we make a motion to close nomination?
I'll make that motion.
Second. Our first and second, then to close it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, Jason.
Yeah.
Refresh my memory. When is the annual meeting?
April.
3rd, 4th, 4th, 5th, something like that.
Okay, so
April
that's the
3rd.
next item. We need to have a voting delegate at the meeting.
So who's planning on attending? I know we had several that went last year. April 3rd.
As of now, I'm
Planning on going, but I'm assuming we have others that are going. Who was the voting delegate?
Planning
the voting delegate last year, right?
That probably was, you guys kept sticking it to the.
Yeah. Well, you're still not.
You was.
Yeah, I don't know, it was me or Steve.
April 3rd.
I was the year before that.
He said he thought he was last time, so it doesn't matter.
Thursday.
Suzanne and Carl, are either one of you going to be going?
I will not be able to attend that.
Pardon me? Are you going to be able to go to the, who's your annual meeting? No? Okay.
Before. And before.
So is there somebody that like to do that? Dale, you said you were not last year or?
You're not the voting delegate.
You would want to consider nominating Dale?
Sure, I'll nominate Dale.
Okay, second. We have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye. All is the same. So Dale, you would be the voting delegate at the annual meeting.
So I have to go.
What's that?
Guess I have to go now, don't I?
Oh, that's, yeah.
You're tired, you can make it.
So the next item are the affiliated organizations.
Hometown Energy, got anything, Brian?
Nothing
How about you, Jason? You had a meeting
I
yesterday.
did have a meeting yesterday. No action items taken to report to the.
Was that? Okay.
And you kind of got who's your update tonight, so, yeah.
Sure.
And I told you what I learned about Accord, so that's.
So everything's good.
He said amazing.
Well, I still called you lazy.
I thought it was amazing. Jason.
Amazing.
Lazy.
And as far as IEC board, we are not meeting until February 19th, so I have nothing to. Director training or
Conferences, was there anything that was attended by anyone? Nothing? All right, we'll need a motion to adjourn. If anybody has anything to bring up now.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, we got a first, second. We're adjourned.